Welcome to this edition of Rattling the Bars. I'm your host, Mansa Musa. We've been hearing terms like deportation, immigration, arrest, ICE, the federal marshals. When we hear these terms, we hear them relative to people that's undocumented in this country, under the pretense that they committed a crime in this country, that they're being arrested. But the reality is they're being rounded up. They're being rounded up like slaves was rounded up. They're being rounded up like the Japanese was being rounded up and placed in internment camps. Joining me today is Wanda Bertram, communication strategist with the Prison Policy Initiative at one of the most reliable research hubs for data on incarceration. A recent report by the Prison Policy Initiative titled Hiding in Plain Sight revealed how local jails are central to Trump's deportation. Wanda, welcome to Rattling the Bars.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
And so let's start here. Explain to our audience the loophole that the Trump administration is using to bypass city and county sanctuary policies.
Yeah.
Unpack that for our audience.
Right. So I think the place to start is that there are two main federal agencies that are tasked with immigration detention. And one of them is ICE, which most people have heard of, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And then the other one, which is a little bit less well known, is called the US Marshal Service. And the Marshal Service does things that are not immigration too. They're generally speaking the federal agency that handles pretrial detention. And in our report, one of the things we did was we gave an estimate of how many people are in ICE detention and US Marshals detention, because a lot of people don't think about the US Marshals, right?
Right.
And then one of the other things we did was we pointed out this loophole that you mentioned, and it's what we call the loophole is just the fact that lots of local jails, including many that have said we are not going to cooperate with ICE,
right,
have contracts with the U.S. Marshals to house, to detain immigrants who are who are under the jurisdiction of that agency. And actually, ICE can also piggyback off those U.S. Marshals contracts. So whether someone is under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Marshals, and I can explain the difference between that and
right.
ICE, whether someone is under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Marshals or with ICE, there like hundreds of local jails across the country are making room for those detainees to be held. So there are thousands and thousands of detainees who are being held in local jails that are run by sheriffs, the people elect.
Right. Okay, so in terms of the difference between ICE and the federal marshals, because I think we was talking off camera, when you think of a person being detained by the federal marshals, we're thinking about actually a crime has actually been committed. A
That's
crime
right.
in form of like a gun, violation of a federal statute, violate a federal criminal code, violate a federal law. I'm in possession of large quantities of drugs. I'm
Right.
Doing counterfeit. I'm in possession of weapons. I think they had in Baltimore City, they had passed this law saying that anyone caught in order to get control over what they dubbed as serious possession of guns in the city, they created this law where they say that anyone arrested with a gun in Baltimore, they federalize it. So
Right.
they call it. I'm trying to think if they had a term that they was using, but everybody that got caught with got caught with guns during that time was arrested and put under federal marshal jurisdiction. At that time, I was in Supermax in Baltimore City, and they took a whole section and specifically designed it for that. So talk about that. Talk about the difference between the two and why it's important that people understand that.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up. The U.S. Marshals, like you're saying, when I think of the U.S. Marshals, I think about people being charged with gun-related crimes, with drug-related crimes, sometimes with federal violent offenses. The federal government has a wide latitude to choose to prosecute certain cases. And once they bring someone under their jurisdiction, or if they arrest someone, obviously, they can also bring people who are under state or local jurisdiction into their jurisdiction through these state and local agreements. So the long and short of it is, if you are charged with a federal crime, you are under the U.S. Marshals jurisdiction. The rub here is that there's been an increase in several thousand people since Trump took office in January who are under U.S. Marshals, who are booked into U.S. Marshals jurisdiction for immigration-related quote unquote crimes. And that what is an immigration crime?
Yeah,
that can be as simple as just being undocumented, right? Illegal entry or illegal re-entry. So I think most people think, okay, if you're under U.S. Marshals jurisdiction, you must have committed some horrible crime. But there's a lot of people there who are just undocumented, and their cases are becoming criminalized.
And I was talking to one of the staff members here, and I was telling him that, and this is my thinking, right? The criminal element that would be under the federal marshals, they be like, in their mind, they like, hurry up, hurry up and get me out, send me to wherever you want to send me at, so I can hurry up and get back in the country. A person that's committed a immigration crime or whatever these terms they're using, these people are the threat that they represent is, I'm a threat because I'm working hard, I'm paying taxes. But talk about how local jails specifically play into Trump's mass deportation program.
Yeah.
Both in terms of scale of incarceration and immigration arrest. And you spoke on it earlier about how many people being arrested and being detained. But talk about how it's playing out.
Yeah, we know. So we estimate that on any given day, currently, there's about 83,000 people, immigrants, being held for ICE and the U.S. Marshals. I can break down how we got to that number, but okay. Of those, we know that about 10,000, a little over 10,000 people are being held in local jails for ICE. We unfortunately can't tell how many people are being held in local jails for the marshals. We just don't have that granular of data. But what we actually, I will say one more thing. I'll throw out one more statistic, which is that between January and May of this year, the number of people held for immigration reasons grew more in local jails than it did in privately run detention centers. I'm throwing this out there just to say that jails play an essential role in housing immigrants for these agencies. I think a lot of people think about ICE as having tons of detention centers, its own detention centers around the country. And it's true, there are several, but these agencies depend on local facilities that can hold people temporarily or for a longer time after they're arrested. In fact, in 26 states, jails provide the sole detention capacity to ICE and US Marshals. So a lot of people think, okay, sure, this is going on in Texas, this is going on in Florida with Alligator Alcatraz. It's not happening where I live. You might be wrong. It might be happening where you live because there's a lot of jails caught up in this.
Right. And that right there, the impact, talk about the impact that have on the population, because if I'm a state and I'm outsourcing, I'm contracting with the federal government, I'm contracting with ICE to provide so many beds for immigration, or a section for immigration, then how does that play out in terms of like the way that particular detention center function overall? Because now I have to allocate staff, I have to allocate extra money, I have to allocate, and in terms of like what they're entitled to versus what people that's pre-trial is entitled to. Have y'all, is it a problem with that, or have you, from your investigation and your study, have you seen this being problematic?
Well, I think we need to start talking about the money. Because that's the reason that ICE and the Marshals, that's the reason that local jails have these agreements in the first place. Jails are keen to bring in money from the federal government that they get in exchange for housing people. And they get anywhere between $50 and $100 per person. Right. So it's thousands of dollars that come in just every month for a local jail. importantly, we have very little transparency into what that money is used for.
Right.
But some jails have been open about saying we are using this to pay our staff. We're using it to cover costs of the jail.
Right.
It ties into a very toxic pattern that we've seen over the last couple of decades, which is that counties will they will build bigger new jails,
Mm-hmm.
anticipating that they'll be able to allocate some of their new jail space to renting to the federal government or to their state prison system. Um, and where there's two ways that this all goes wrong. One is that oftentimes these jails are already understaffed. They don't
Right.
have the staff to care for their own populations, much less an additional influx of immigrants, or people held by the US Marshals for any reason. And then the second way this goes haywire is that these populations that come in from the feds, they flux, right? They come and go. And when those populations, when that source of revenue dries up for the jail,
Yep.
they're going to need to justify the existence of such a large facility in other ways. And that's going to lead to more local incarceration. We like to say that if you build it, they will fill it. And
Yeah.
when counties build bigger jails, anticipating renting beds to ICE or the feds in some other capacity, they find a way to fill those beds, whether it's with federal detainees or their own community members.
Right. And then in some states like California, Massachusetts, New York, and Illinois have laws that restrict local law enforcement from collaborating with ICE. But that's like when you can do a comparison versus the amount of money that y'all talked about how
Mm-hmm.
this past great beautiful nightmare of a bill that they passed. They allocated a lot of money to ICE and a lot of money to the federal government. So how do you see the pushback, or what can states do to like eliminate this nightmare? Because as you said, at the end game,
Mm-hmm.
the state gonna be holding the bag. In the end game, they're gonna have to come with some way to fill themselves, and that's gonna be at the expense of the citizens of their particular state or county. Talk about that.
Yeah. One thing in the report that we really hammer on is that communities have, insofar as communities are providing some of the backbone of detention, they also have the power to be a real thorn in the side of the Trump administration by resisting that. Like you pointed out, some states and several counties have instituted sanctuary city policies, and often that means or sanctuary state policies, and that limits the jail's collaborations with ICE. Communities also need to cancel their contracts with the U.S. Marshals because, as I said at the top, uh, ICE can piggyback off of the U.S. Marshals. They can put people in jails through a U.S. Marshals contract. So those often
Mm-hmm.
go overlooked because again, the Marshals are not an agency most people think about. So that's a step that counties have been able to take for several years. They can do it now, and they should do it now. Um, the I think the other thing, is on the longer kind of on a longer time frame, being critical of your local government when they talk about building a new and bigger jail. Um, just to throw something out there, this is not related to immigration at all, but about 80% of people in local jails are there pre-trial. And now this is another thing that Trump has been trying to attack is bail
Right.
reform. But when counties are facing overcrowded or understaffed jails and they have these large pretrial populations, one thing that most counties have not tried is decarceration, right? Pursuing bail reform, pursuing
Right.
cashless bail as a way of decreasing their jail populations. Instead, what many counties will do is they will try to build a bigger jail, thinking it's going to solve the problem.
Right.
Um, but and sometimes that's what gets counties into this pickle with the federal government is they build this big new jail, and then they have a big tab to cover, right? And it's very helpful if the federal government comes in and says, well, we can offset some of your costs. You just have
Mm-hmm.
to house some people for us. So, I mean, I definitely, to anyone listening who's wondering what can I do in my community, I definitely would say being critical, being skeptical of any plans to expand your county jail, and show up to city council meetings about that. Be a sticky, you know, sticky wheel, because that's how this happens. That's how it starts.
Okay, and thank you, Wanda. Tell our audience how they can stay in touch with you or stay aware of some of the work that you're doing with Prison Policy Initiative as we close out.
Well, no, I mean, first, thank you so much for having me. I think it's great to be able to come on and talk about this stuff. Our website is www.prisonpolicy.org. We have a newsletter. If you sign up for that, you'll get everything that we publish. It's about a once-a-week newsletter. We also have social media. If you go to basically whatever social media you're on, we are at /prisonpolicy.
Thank you. And as we close out, we thank you and appreciate all the work that y'all are doing at Prison Policy Initiative. And we want to tell our audience, remind our audience that we deal with evidence. And it's self-evident based on the statistics that the Prison Policy Initiative has offered us, that you can fact check them to get a clear understanding. But what we do know is this here. We know that people are being rounded up. We know that agencies that's supposed to serve and protect people's rights are being used to help aid and assist in rounding people up. We know that people are being housed in astronomical numbers in inhumane environments for one reason and one reason only, all because they're undocumented in this country. They haven't committed no crimes to the extent that's being perpetuated by the Trump administration. They're here, they're undocumented, and the most crime that they committed is driving without a license or picking tomatoes. We ask that you continue to support Real News and Rattling the Bars. We ask that you continue to evaluate this information. We ask that you weigh in on what you think about this information. But more importantly, we ask that you make a decision on what you think should be done and do that. Thank you.